name is Emily Truscott. I'm a registered dietitian here at the Fixel Institute for Neurological Diseases, where I work with patients living with all types of neurological diseases, including Huntington's disease. Today I'll provide a brief overview about the importance of nutrition for people living with Huntington's disease. I'll also talk about our diet recommendations and symptoms that you might be aware of that you would need to see a registered dietitian for. And then I'll go over some nutrition strategies for these common obstacles. When we think about nutrition, a lot of the time we think about dieting, but nutrition is so much more than the fad diets that you see on the internet. When I think about nutrition as a dietitian, I'm thinking about protein, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and of course, fluids. And all of these things together are important for helping regulate our energy levels, our mood, and our gut health. There are many Huntington's disease symptoms that can affect how much nutrition we need and the amounts of foods that you're able to eat. It's also important to know that nutrition is not just about the food that you eat, but it's about the experiences that you have around that food. And that can include things like your cultural traditions, culinary experiences, and social interactions. One of the biggest questions I get is, what should I be eating? We recommend what we call a Mediterranean-style diet. This is an anti-inflammatory diet, meaning that it helps reduce inflammation in the body, and it's largely plant-based. It's rich in fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, olive oil, pulses like beans, nuts, and seeds. Now, this is a general dietary pattern. It's very different from a fad diet that eliminates all kinds of foods. This diet just recommends limiting red and processed meats and added sugars because these items are associated with poorer health outcomes. The Mediterranean diet also encourages physical activity and enjoying meals together. Here's an overview of what the Mediterranean diet looks like, and you can see the foods on the bottom are the foods that we want to eat the most of, and then as we get towards the top of the pyramid, the foods on the top are the ones that we want to limit when we can. And so at the bottom, we have those foods like the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, olive oil, nuts, and seeds. We really want to eat those items every day. In the middle, we have fish and seafood. Fish is a great source of omega-3 fatty acids, which are very important for brain health. You can find those in your fatty fish like tuna and salmon. Towards the middle, we have our dairy products like yogurt, cheese, milk, eggs. And then we also want to opt for lean proteins like chicken and turkey. Then towards the top, we have those foods that we don't want to eat as much of. Those are our red meats and sweets, like dessert items, and processed meats and packaged type foods. When I say packaged foods, I mean things like your potato chips, sugary cereals, those sorts of things. Now, like I mentioned, there's many things that you might see a dietitian for, and I've provided a list here for you just to be aware of these symptoms to watch out for. You can see a dietitian if you just want general nutrition education, if you're interested in learning more about a Mediterranean-style diet. If you're having trouble swallowing or feeding yourself, that's something that a dietitian can help form some strategies with you for. If you have difficulty planning and preparing meals or not meeting your hydration goals, if you have gut problems like constipation and diarrhea, that's something that we work with a lot of patients for. If you're losing weight, if your appetite changes and you're not feeling as hungry, or if you're confused about diet recommendations out there or the various types of dietary supplements that you see on the shelves in the grocery store. I'll go over a few of these obstacles to look out for, some symptoms that are kind of red flags to me as a dietitian and things to just be on the lookout for. So swallowing difficulty is something that's pretty common in Huntington's disease. This is where you might have some coughing when you're eating foods, or you might notice that you're choking on foods or liquids, like when you drink things. It's important to see a speech-language pathologist if you feel like you might have swallowing difficulty. An SLP will be able to assess your swallow using X-ray technology to see kind of what's going on under the surface. and they can make personalized recommendations based on what they find. Now, those might be swallowing strategies, or they might be modifying the texture of your diet to make swallowing a little easier and safer. Now, when we think about texture-modified diets, I know a lot of people go straight to a puree diet. That's what's on your mind. But we have all kinds of options here, and I've listed those at the bottom. We have an easy-to-chew diet, soft and bite-sized diet, minced and moist, and pureed. So don't hold off on seeing a speech-language pathologist if you're fearful that you might be recommended a puree diet, because chances are we have a lot more strategies that we can implement before we get to that point. Generally, we will recommend soft, moist, and easy-to-chew foods, and we might recommend adding sauces and gravies to your dry and crumbly foods. So those are things like your rice or your bread. Those tend to get caught up in the throat a little more often than other types of foods. So I've listed a few foods here that are examples of foods that might be easier to chew and swallow. Proteins are one of the tougher foods. Usually you're eating meats. Those can be tougher when you have swallowing difficulty. So ground meats might be recommended, like ground chicken or ground turkey. Shredded poultry, something like a shredded chicken salad, or fish. That's a softer protein source. Eggs, like scrambled eggs. Milk and cheese give you some protein. Yogurt is a great source of protein. Beans and peas, you just have to be careful with the skins on those. Some people get choked up on those. And then nut butters, like your peanut butter or almond butter. These are sticky foods, so some people find difficulty eating those foods. And if you do, but you still want the taste of that, you can always put it in a smoothie to blend it up so it's not as sticky. Some fruit and vegetable options that might be easier to swallow are steamed vegetables. You might just have to steam them a little bit longer to make them a little softer. Veggie sauces, like a tomato sauce that you would put in a spaghetti. You can always take soups and blend them up to have more of a consistent texture to that soup. Canned fruits are typically softer than your fresh fruits. Pureed fruit, so something like an applesauce, and again, smoothies are a great option for getting all of those nutrients in. And then I've listed some grains here too, so rice with gravy. You might add sauces and gravy to that rice to kind of form it up so those little particles don't get stuck in your throat. Oatmeal is a great option, cream of wheat. Soaked cereals, so I'm thinking of a breakfast cereal here. If you have difficulty with having those solid bits sitting in the milk, you can always strain the milk off of that cereal once it's had time to absorb some of that milk to make it a little softer. Breads with sauces, so you might put butter on your bread or dip it in something like a broth to add some moisture to it. Whole grain pancakes and whole grain muffins are another great source of those grains. Undernutrition is another thing that we want to look out for. So some symptoms of this might be you're losing weight without trying to. That could reflect you not getting enough through nutrition. So through your diet, you might not be eating enough. Fatigue and decreased strength. So you might be losing some of your muscle mass. You might not feel as strong as you once did. And then if you just feel like your appetite is not as great and you do notice that you're eating less, these are all definitely reasons to talk to a dietitian. With Huntington's, we also see increased movement. So you might be burning more energy, so your body might need more energy in terms of the food that you eat. So if you're losing weight, but you still feel like you're eating the same amount that you normally did, it might just be that you need a little bit more calories in your diet to make up for the energy that you're burning throughout the day. It's important that if you're losing weight that you let your provider know early on, because there's lots of strategies that we can implement early on to prevent further weight loss. When we lose weight, typically we're losing our muscle mass, and we really don't want you to lose that muscle mass because, like I said before, that's very important for your strength, your mobility, and your balance. So here are some strategies that we might talk about if you start to lose weight. We really want to optimize meal timing, so trying to eat small meals or snacks every 2 to 3 hours rather than doing 3 big meals throughout the day. This gives you more opportunities to eat, and you're not having to sit down and eat a feast. It's just, those small snacks that you can have every 2 to 3 hours to really give your body the fuel that it needs consistently in your day. We want to focus on those protein-rich foods to help maintain muscle mass, strength, and your immune function. So like I mentioned before, those are going to be things like your meat, fish, beans, peas, lentils, eggs, yogurt, milk, cheese, nuts, seeds. We have lots of sources of protein in our diet. And that's something that if you would like to talk to a dietitian, we can typically really individualize those recommendations for your preferences. We also want to focus on calorie-rich foods. So calories are a unit of energy that we use to measure how much energy is in the food that we eat. So if you're burning more energy, then you would need more of those calories. We want to try to add calories to your meals without you having to eat a whole lot more food, especially if you're not feeling as hungry. And we can do that by adding fatty foods to the meals that you're already eating. Those fatty foods might be things like avocados, oils like olive oil, nut butters like I mentioned before, the peanut butter and the almond butters, gravies, sauces, and again, any types of butters out there. And then we also have the option to add nutrition supplements. So these are things like your commercial nutrition drinks like an Ensure or a Boost, or protein powders that you might use to put in your own homemade smoothies. And there are so many, hundreds and hundreds of different nutrition supplements out there. So that's something that I really recommend talking to a dietitian about, because they make supplements that are made for weight loss, and then they make supplements that are made for weight gain. So we really want to make sure that you're getting the right type of supplement in your diet. If swallowing difficulty becomes too burdensome, and if you are losing weight, nutrition support is another option that we have. This is basically a feeding tube that can help deliver nutrition, hydration, and medications directly into your stomach. And this might be recommended if you're unable to meet those nutrition needs through your diet alone after trying those strategies that we just mentioned. If you have swallowing difficulty that really limits your ability to eat enough food or drink enough fluids, or if it poses a risk for pneumonia, which is a bacterial overgrowth in your lungs that can happen when you choke on foods. And then if you just feel like meal times are too burdensome, so you're having anxiety about choking when you're eating, if you feel like you're taking too long to eat, so think, over 45 minutes to eat a meal, or if you're feeling fatigued when you're chewing or swallowing, so much so that you're not able to finish a meal because you become too tired. This is another strategy that you can definitely talk to your healthcare team about if you feel like this is the right one for you. One of the biggest questions I'm asked when I talk to patients about feeding tubes is whether or not you would be able to eat food by mouth once you have a feeding tube placed. And typically the answer is yes, as long as it's safe to do so. So a feeding tube allows us to give you the nutrition that you need through the tube, where you're able to kind of eat the foods that you enjoy, like a cup of ice cream here and there, and not really have to worry about eating so much by mouth that you have to meet all of your nutrition needs through the foods that you're eating. So in conclusion, nutrition is the foundation of our overall health, so it's something that we definitely want to pay attention to when it comes to the overall treatment for Huntington's disease. Definitely watch out for any of the signs and symptoms that we talked about today. And I always say nutrition is so individualized, so talk to your healthcare team to better understand what your specific nutrition needs are and what kinds of resources are available to you. I'll leave my contact information here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is emilytruscott@ufl.edu. Thank you.